news of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store for a tag. In the back it says USA.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Thanks for joining me on your Saturday afternoon. Well, this week was indeed a historic week. Pope Francis traveled to this great land of ours, and there's no doubt about it, this is a holy man. A man of deep prayer, deep commitment to the poor. And you saw in much of his journey here the beauty of the man himself and also of the great institution that he represents. I thought one of the most moving images of the time that he has spent here was certainly what we saw coming from the National Basilica, the shrine of the Immaculate Conception there in Washington, D.C., where he led a mass, a beautiful mass with thousands of people in prayer. And it was really quite remarkable to see that mass being beamed from the television screen into the living rooms of Americans, my living room in particular. And I thought that you could clearly not, it was undeniable that there's a great spiritual power that came from that mass. From the lifting of the body of Christ with all those people praying and worshiping together. It was truly beautiful. And I think on the whole, the Pope's presence here will be a blessing on this land. All the people that were praying in unison certainly will bring blessings upon this land. Now, having said that, I still must say that I was deeply disappointed by the Pope's remarks to Congress. This was the first time that a pontiff has spoken to Congress, a joint meeting of Congress. And I was hoping, as I think many, many traditionalists and conservatives like myself were hoping, that he would really take on some of the big challenges that we Americans are facing, that he would give us moral clarity specifically on the challenges, on the issues that we are dealing with. Instead, the Pope chose to deliver a speech that was, in many respects, full of claptrap, full of liberal claptrap, and that failed to address a lot of the key issues that we are struggling with. I am a great fan of Pope John Paul II, the Saint John Paul II, and Pope Benedict. I think we were really privileged in our lifetime to have these two awesome popes. And this pope, this other pope, Pope Francis, while he's a good man, and I believe that he is sincere in his regard for the poor, and I believe that he is sincere in his willingness to transform the church so that it's more accessible to the people, and that those two things are very good elements that he's bringing forward. There's a lot that the Pope says which I find extremely disturbing. And so I'm not really a fan of this particular Pope. From the moment that he began his papacy, I had high hopes for him because I thought that he was right to recall one element of the gospel, which we don't necessarily recall as often as we should, which is our duty to be good to the poor, to the weak, to the abused, to the oppressed. And I thought also he could awaken the youth in that kind of activism, as he seemed to do when he mixed with the youth and would say things to them like challenge current orthodoxies, make a mess, shake things up. But in the spirit of the gospel, I thought that he would do great good in awakening much of the youth to the entire teachings of the gospel. However, what I'm seeing now and what I saw shortly after the initial good impression that he made is that this is a man that really has a left-wing view of the world and is much more interested in advancing liberal ideas than he is in truly representing the entirety of the Catholic faith or of the Christian faith. What did I find so disturbing in Pope Francis' speech to Congress? Well, he talked about the disturbing social and political situation of the world today. And yet he did not reference what is making this world of ours, what is turning it upside down. He never specifically said radical Islam. He never specifically addressed the fact that you have these Islamic extremists that are beheading Christians, that are beheading anybody that doesn't agree with their Sharia law, their interpretation of Sharia law, that they are leading to this massive refugee crisis. He didn't call them out by name. Instead, he made a very bland and disturbing set of statements. And I want to read this. Quote, "Our world is increasingly a place of violent conflict, hatred, and brutal atrocities committed even in the name of God and of religion. We know that no religion is immune from forms of individual delusion or ideological extremism. This means that we must be especially attentive to every type of fundamentalism, whether religious or of any other kind. A delicate balance is required to combat violence perpetrated in the name of a religion, an ideology, or an economic system, while also safeguarding religious freedom, intellectual freedom, and individual freedoms." I mean, this is such a bland statement. We know that, yes, our world today is full of violent conflict and hatred and brutal atrocities, but these are not committed simply, quote unquote, in the name of God and of religion. They are committed nowadays in the name of a specific interpretation of Allah and of the Muslim faith. And this was a moment that he had to clearly draw a distinction between the Christian faith and this radical form of Islam that is turning the Middle East and much of the world upside down. This was a teachable moment. And it wasn't just a teachable moment, it was a leadership moment. A moment to say, what is going on there is evil, we denounce it, and the Christian faith has the truth that is being missed in the perpetration of this violent faith. In other words, here he is, the representative of the Catholic Church, a spokesperson for Christianity, a moral and spiritual leader, and instead of stating clearly the differences between the Christian faith and the Muslim faith, the extreme versions of it, and even calling upon Muslims to reject the extreme versions of their faith, he just decided to lump all religions into one group, as though they're all the same, and to lump ideological extremism in the same mix. Well, we don't really have a situation right now today of ideological extremism, as we did say in the middle of the 20th century with communism and fascism. Those were elements of ideological extremism. What we have is a specific form of religious extremism and barbarism. It is a great evil ravaging the Middle East and affecting the entire world, as so many of these terrorist attacks are taking place all over everywhere, as we saw in France. They're affecting Europe, and they're affecting us here in America, the Boston Marathon bombings, a most recent example. Instead of addressing this key problem that we face, he chose to morally equivocate. And that's where I see the liberalism of this Pope. Not all religions are the same. And you, as the head of one specific religion, the Catholic religion, you should be explaining its glories, its virtues, its merits, and also as a Christian leader, taking on the mantle of Christian leadership. I didn't hear any of that in his address to Congress. In addition, he made a statement which is so disturbing that it literally makes my stomach churn. This is what he said, quote, "But there is another temptation which we must especially guard against, this simplistic reductionism which sees only good or evil, or if you will, the righteous and sinners." You know, he asks us subsequently to confront, quote, every form of polarization which would divide it into these two camps. This is a preposterous statement. As head of the Catholic Church, he should be saying there is good versus evil. We represent the good, and the Christians as a whole in the world represent the good. And we must confront what is clearly this great and grave evil in our midst, radical Islam. I don't understand why he couldn't say that. And to try to blur the distinction between good and evil, to try to say that there is something gray that we should be more sensitive to, it is the typical liberal line. And we didn't need more of that. We need clarity from a religious leader, not blurring of distinctions, not failure to call evil what it clearly is. And I think, too, what was also extremely disappointing was that he did say that we must protect life from the very beginning. And he made a bold statement about wanting to bring about the end of the death penalty around the world. So a global initiative to end the death penalty as part of the project for upholding life. And I am one of those people. I oppose the death penalty. I'm really consistent, I believe, in my regard for life. I do not believe that any human being has the right to take any other person's life, period. And that is the life of the most vicious, heinous murderer, or the life of the most innocent unborn. Yet this Pope could identify clearly that he doesn't want the death penalty for criminals, and there he took a strong stand for life. But he didn't specifically mention the scourge of abortion, which is ravaging this nation and undermining our moral fabric. And especially in light of the horrific videos that we have seen coming out of Planned Parenthood, where fetuses are being preserved so that their body parts can be taken for research. I mean, this is the height of barbarism. This is evil, if ever I have seen it. And it was a moment for the Pope to denounce the great evils in our midst. On the one hand, radical Islam and the culture of jihad, and on the other hand, the assault on the unborn. He did neither, and in those regards, his speech was a miserable failure. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com, upholding values that will never die.
You won't ever find him where the rest go. You will find against me.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
It's my
Welcome back. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com. Well, the GOP race heated up this week. Carly Fiorina is making waves. She is surging in the polls, now considered a real contender since her performance at the last GOP debate, in which she did very well. And she is rising. People are taking a look at her record now, her entire career. And they're asking the question, did she really just run from the beginning to perhaps be a vice president? Maybe she wants to do well enough to be just a VP, or perhaps be part of the next administration. Or is she really running to win it all and become the first female president of the United States? She was asked that very question. Listen to her answer.
All the Republican candidates that remain, you've got to get together and stop this man. Now, do you believe that?
Look,
do you believe that Donald Trump has to be stopped?
I intend to beat Donald Trump.
Well, she intends to beat him. That was a question that O'Reilly asked her based on the firestorm that Walker ignited earlier in the week, which I'll address later on in the broadcast, about whether or not all Republicans should band together to stop Donald Trump. And she replied forthrightly, she does intend to beat him. She wants to win the nomination. And she has said in previous statements that she will go after Hillary Clinton. If Hillary Clinton is nominee, she will go after her very, very forcefully. And she has shown that she is very good on the attack. Now, the problem with Carly Fiorina is that she has a track record that is mostly a track record in the business arena. The record is not one of outstanding success. It's a mixed record. Some would say it's a record of failure. But let's be charitable and say, at the very best, it's mixed. In other words, she wasn't, oh, what an incredible CEO, what a remarkable success by all accounts. At best, it was mixed. And so her record in the private sector is mixed. And she has no real record in the public sector. So the problem with Carly Fiorina right off the bat is she's an entirely untested force right now. And she is being bolstered, as I've said before, by so many who are just looking for an alternative to Donald Trump. They just want Donald Trump to be taken off his perch and someone else to replace him. And then perhaps that person too will be knocked off so that an establishment candidate can win the GOP nomination. So we see that with Carly Fiorina, although she's very articulate and she's very intelligent, if you look at her track record, it's mixed at best. At worst, it's got some big problems in it. Problems that Carla Boxer, for example, was able to use brilliantly to defeat Carly Fiorina in a campaign for the Senate race. And the problem with her record is, during her tenure, there was a tremendous cutting down of the size of Hewlett-Packard. Jobs were lost. And she can easily be presented as a ruthless corporate shark who destroys the livelihood of the little guy and then walks away with a really lucrative package for herself to the tune of millions of dollars. So I think on the whole, Carly Fiorina's record is really problematic for the GOP. Apart from some of the other problems that she has, which is she often comes across as very stiff and very condescending in the manner in which she speaks. Now, regardless of all these obvious problems with Carly Fiorina's record and candidacy, you have so many supporting her and folks in the media almost cheering her on. Somebody like Rich Lowry of National Review had an explosive moment on the air on Fox News when he trumpeted Carly Fiorina's skills at the GOP debate. Roll it.
No one disputes that. And look, Trump obviously attacks everyone, but she's become a much bigger target. And I think part of what's going on here is that last debate. Let's be honest. Carly cut his off with the precision of a surgeon, and he knows it. He knows it. He's insulted and bullied his way to the top of the polls. No one was able to best him ever except for this tough lady on that stage, and it must kill him. He must be simmering about it to this night.
Well, it was absolutely remarkable. By the way, it is our own producer who deleted the inappropriate word. That inappropriate word actually aired on Fox News, which led to Donald Trump tweeting out that he should not be allowed on TV and that the FCC should fine him. And he also tweeted out that Fox News owes him an apology for allowing Rich Lowry to use such foul language on TV. Unheard of. That's what Donald Trump said. And in that regard, he's totally right. I couldn't help but snicker at the hypocrisy of Megyn Kelly, who, when that occurred, she kind of covered her eyes and looked all bashful as though this was, an affront to her modesty and dignity. When we know that Megyn Kelly appeared years ago on the Howard Stern show talking about her own private parts, her breasts, her sex life with her husband, and her husband's private parts. So I thought, Megyn Kelly acting modest in light of this word that exploded from Rich Lowry's mouth was really hypocritical. And indeed, Fox News should have prevented that word from going out, and that incident shouldn't have happened, in other words. What made the editor of National Review, Rich Lowry, think that he could be so disrespectful in analyzing the back and forth between Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina? It really was outrageous. And Trump, of course, responded in kind. Rolling.
You're right now at odds with Fox News. We know how powerful they are in the Republican Party. And you're at war with Rich Lowry, who is the editor of National Review, which is really sort of the gold standard of conservative magazines.
I don't think anybody reads it, Joe. I think it has no power whatsoever. I'll be honest. I think it has no power whatsoever. And he's not a respected guy.
I read it.
You're the only one.
Joe has no friends. I have no friends. That is true. But I don't think I'm the only one.
So there you have it. Lowry taking a swipe at Trump and Trump punching right back. And during the week, this escalated to the point that Trump said, well, I'm boycotting Fox News altogether. The latest reports now are that he is going to meet with Roger Ailes one more time, and that meeting is going to take place next week. But as we stand, Trump released a statement. He's going to boycott Fox News. He's tired of being treated unfairly. And one of the main grievances that he has is that there are so many pundits that are criticizing him and not giving him enough credit. And so he wants much more balance in the way that he's covered. In that regard, I must say Donald Trump is absolutely right. The coverage of him is totally tainted. It is 90% negative, with rarely ever any kind of praise or actual respect for him or his supporters, any respect for his accomplishments or the acumen of his supporters. And so in that regard, Fox News is betraying its very own motto to be, quote unquote, fair and balanced. And Fox News is doing itself a great disservice because it's losing tremendous credibility. They are clearly being biased in their coverage of Donald Trump and in their coverage of candidates that they don't want to see win, like Ted Cruz. That's not their job. Their job is simply to report, not constantly editorialize. Now, you do have a section of a show which is devoted to editorializing. In that case, they should allow for somebody to come forward that can defend Ted Cruz or Donald Trump, to defend those that are not getting a fair shake. And in their reporting coverage, in that coverage, it should be crystal clear that there's no bias. And yet, that's not what's happening. And as a result, Fox News is losing a tremendous amount of credibility. Now, unfortunately, what's also happening is that Donald Trump is losing support. He was at a height of 32% in the polls, and then following his GOP debate, he slipped a bit, as I said that he would. And he just recently slipped to 25%, then went up one more point to 26%. But you're seeing here a recurring pattern with Donald Trump, which really he has to stop. And in fact, one of his campaign advisors, Roger Stone, actually quit working with Donald Trump precisely for this reason. He quit because he was sick and tired of Donald Trump constantly having these battles with members of the media. Donald Trump is coming across more and more as somebody who is cantankerous, as somebody who is constantly feuding, as somebody who every other day he is at war. And what this is doing is, this is detracting from our ability to hear what he wants to do for this country. That's really what we're all interested in, listening to him say. We want to listen to him talk about what he's going to do for this country. And initially, his message was coming out loud and clear, especially his message on building a wall and finally addressing this problem of illegal immigration by doing something really tough with the illegals that are here. However, right now, that message is being drowned. It's being totally drowned by the fact that he is constantly at war. And it's not just being at war with Fox News. He was at war with NBC. He's been at war with various online publications. Every other day, Donald Trump is feuding. And that makes him come across increasingly as someone angry and cantankerous, difficult to get along with. And this is the key problem, not a consensus builder. Because, as Huckabee said very brilliantly on this show, anyone can start a fight. But what we really want in a leader is someone who achieves results. And achieving results requires bringing people together to achieve some kind of a consensus. And right now, he is showing us that he doesn't have the ability to bring about consensus. I want to share a story that really taught me an important lesson. And it taught me the importance, too, of this key leadership skill, consensus building. In the history department at Howard University, there were 2 faculty members who were constantly bickering in every single department meeting. And I took one of them aside, and she gave me the explanation of how it all started. And I realized that she was ultimately in the right. Yet, at the department meetings, it didn't matter who was initially right. All we could see was 2 people constantly fighting, and it made us dislike both of them. And that's what happens when you see a constant feud. This is going to hurt Donald Trump. He has to find a way to stand his ground against the bias in the media, which is clearly there, while also being congenial and being able to get his message out and show that he can be a consensus builder. And in that regard, he does have a model he should emulate. It's Ronald Reagan. He was always able to find a funny way to point out the unfairness in the media, to point out the hypocrisies in the liberal culture. He was able to do that with a smile, with a laugh, while advancing his agenda and speaking directly to the people. Donald Trump has to pick up his game on this regard. Otherwise, his numbers are going to continue to slide. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that will never die.
Opportunity comes once in a lifetime. This soul's escaping through this hole that is gaping. This world is mine for the taking. Make me king as we move toward a new world order.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
But I wonder what would happen if you say what you want to say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I want to see you be brave with what you want to say and let the words fall out.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com, coming in with one of my all-time favorite songs about speaking forthrightly and saying exactly what you want to say. Well, this week, Marco Rubio had an outstanding interview on Fox News. You know, if you've been listening to this show consistently, you know that I'm really not a fan of Marco Rubio. I have never forgiven him for essentially betraying the base shortly after 2012 and joining up with a group of senators to try to ram comprehensive immigration reform down our throats. And I've never bought his story that he wants to do anything other than what he did then. I think that is his ultimate goal. He does want comprehensive immigration reform. And recently he was asked very specifically about this entire controversy surrounding his plan. And he has said that I want to seal the border first, reform the legal immigration system, and maybe something like 12 years down the line, provide a path to citizenship. Now he's tweaking it to say, well, you know, sometime far down the line, we're going to have comprehensive immigration reform, which includes a pathway to citizenship. In other words, folks, he's been all over the map because he's playing us on that score. He thought that in 2012, he'd have a golden opportunity to be the man that we would be putting on our shoulders as the leader with a huge accomplishment under his belt, and one that he believed he would sail perhaps to the nomination by now. Instead, his gambit failed, and I believe that he has been very slippery in answering questions regarding his support of comprehensive immigration reform ever since. I don't believe him. I think he's slippery. I think he's a liar. In any case, this week, he did have an outstanding interview on Fox News, and he made some really brilliant points about some of the weaknesses in the candidacy of Donald Trump. Listen to this.
As I said, I think that the most important thing a president will ever do is provide for the national security of our country. And I think up to now he hasn't really answered serious questions about national security. And until he does, there should be concerns, not just about him, but about any candidate that's not able to speak in detail, with clarity, and with seriousness about the national security threats that we face. The government doesn't run the economy. The economy is run by the private sector. The job of a president is to ensure we have policies that allow the private sector to grow and prosper. But national security, the government is in charge of that. And you better have a president that understands the threats we face and what we have to do about it. And if you can't articulate that as a candidate, you cannot be commander-in-chief. And so he has to meet that as the rest of us do as well.
So is that a no?
Well, as of now, I haven't heard him talk seriously about national security. Hopefully that will change. I wish all of our candidates would speak more seriously about national security. Some have done better than others. Look, Carly Fiorina's not in government. She knows more about it than he does. So if you took the time, you could learn more about it. But ultimately, the most important thing that we need from our next president is to be someone who understands the threats we face and has real solutions to those problems. So far, he hasn't met that threshold in my mind. But, you know, there's still time, I suppose.
Well, I think that Rubio did an excellent job of explaining what the role of the commander-in-chief is, how important it is that he be fluent in foreign affairs. And he's 100% right. That really is the purview of the next president. You know, on economic issues, on domestic issues, the president's hands are tied by Congress. As we've seen, even Obama has lamented that and has tried to circumvent Congress with all kinds of unlawful executive orders. And Rubio is totally right. So in domestic affairs, when it comes to the economy and social policy, so much of that is in the hands of Congress. But when it comes to foreign affairs, it's the president who takes the lead. And we need to see a fluency in foreign affairs from our candidates. And that's just a basic requirement. So what have we seen from Donald Trump? Have we seen a fluency in foreign affairs? No, we haven't. He has to do a lot better in that regard. He hasn't told us specifically what he would do to solve the problems. He just keeps telling us that we should trust him and that we should just trust his political judgment. Well, why should we trust him? Why should we trust anybody? The entire system that we've created here, one of checks and balances, is predicated on mistrust of individuals. That's why we have this entire process, because we don't trust anybody. And therefore, we ask questions, ask a million questions, and test our candidates again and again and again. And even then, when they're elected, we put all kinds of constraints around them. That's the brilliance of the system that our founding fathers gave us. We don't trust anybody. And so Donald Trump needs to give a couple of foreign policy speeches which are really detailed and really substantive. He came out with this line, which is absolutely laughable, which he said that he's sometimes vague on the details because he doesn't want to totally unveil a plan because it will threaten national security. You don't want to tell the enemy exactly what you're going to do. I mean, that's preposterous. There is a big difference between an outline that has quite substantive details in it and actually a plan that is going to be implemented with national security secrets inside it. I mean, it's preposterous. It's amateurish what he said. He really is going to have to step up to the plate in that regard as well. Otherwise, as I said in the previous segment, you're going to see that slippage continue to happen in the polls for him. Now, turning to another candidate who made big waves this week, it was Ben Carson. And he said that a Muslim who adheres to Sharia law should never be elected to become a president of the United States because Sharia law is in conflict with the Constitution. Listen to Ben Carson. Roll it.
Should a president's faith matter? Should your faith matter to voters?
Well, I guess it depends on what that faith is. If it's inconsistent with the values and principles of America, then of course it should matter. But if it fits within the realm of America and consistent with the Constitution, no problem.
So do you believe that Islam is consistent with the Constitution?
No, I don't. I do not. I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. I absolutely would not agree with that.
And would you ever consider voting for a Muslim for Congress?
Congress is a different story, but it depends on who that Muslim is and what their policies are, just as it depends on what anybody else is, you know. And you know, if there's somebody who's of any faith, but they say things and their life has been consistent with things that will elevate this nation and make it possible for everybody to succeed and bring peace and harmony, then I'm with them.
So with those words, he set off a firestorm. And others have piled on, folks like Senator Ted Cruz, saying, look, the Constitution stipulates that there should be no religious test, and therefore a Muslim can be elected to any office in this country. Yes, That's true. That's what the Constitution says. But what Ben Carson said, he didn't say that a Muslim isn't allowed to run. He didn't say that. He said that he simply wouldn't advocate for that, meaning that he wouldn't support a Muslim candidate if that candidate adheres to Sharia law, which trumps the Constitution. I mean, that is just common sense. If you look at Sharia law, everywhere that it has been implemented, it is contrary to the values of this country and the values that are enshrined within our Constitution. So Ben Carson had every right to say what he said. He is 100% right. When Sharia law is implemented, the rights of women are trounced, the rights of minorities are trounced, the rights of homosexuals are trounced. And it's ironic here that you have liberals piling on in their antagonism against Ben Carson when it would be their values, their very liberal values, that would be completely oppressed and denied by Sharia law. So their position is completely nonsensical. So amongst those who decided to jump on the bandwagon and bash Ben Carson was Hillary Clinton. And that led to another firestorm, which is, well, where did this rumor that Obama was a Muslim originate from to begin with? Where did that come from originally? And it's very plain to anybody who has been following politics consistently for the last decade, especially since 2008, that so many of those rumors came directly from the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2008. Roll it.
This week, people have been saying on air here, and I've been reporting it on CNN, and I've been reporting it here, that you were the person behind the whole birther thing, and that that you were the president, was senator at the time, president-elect, actually confronted you about that. Do you care to respond? Did you or your campaign start the whole birther thing, and did you have that confrontation with the president?
No, that is so ludicrous, Don. You know, honestly, I just believe that, first of all, it's totally untrue, and secondly, you know, the president and I have never had any kind of confrontation like that. You know, this is such a bad example of what's wrong with, instantaneous reactions and Americans getting all worked up and people feeding prejudice and paranoia like Donald Trump. And, you know, obviously all of us have to stand against it. And, you know, I have been blamed for nearly everything. That was a new one to me. But, I'll just keep going and talking about what I want to do to get incomes rising and making college affordable and making all of the positive changes that we have to be worried about.
Well, she's lying because it was her campaign that started to circulate an image, a photo of then Senator Barack Obama dressed as a Somali elder. I'm sure you all remember that picture. That picture surfaced when she wasn't doing so well in the 2008 campaign, and the rumors began to circulate by Clinton's supporters. It was definitely all coming from her camp. That, you know, there was something to this Muslim heritage of Obama's that needed to be looked into. And in fact, there is a report which has a memo that one of her campaign advisors presented to her, Mark Penn at the time, which said, in all of your speeches and in all of your debates and in all of your dialogue, keep mentioning how American you are and how your values are American and how you identify with the values of this country. So we have a memo from one of her campaign advisors trying to draw a deliberate contrast between the quote-unquote American Hillary Clinton versus the, what else can you say, but the un-American Barack Obama. So all those rumors about his Muslim past, his Muslim heritage, and whether or not he was born in this country, they originate from the Democrats. They originate from the Hillary Clinton campaign when it was on the ropes. And they were looking for anything to bring him down, including they were doing opposition research to see what kind of school he had attended in Indonesia and how much Muslim instruction there really was in his background. They were the first to lobby that canon. And now she has the gall to act as though anybody that doesn't denounce this is playing to the worst of our country, et cetera, et cetera. You know, Hillary Clinton, once again, you've shown yourself to be a shameless liar. And once again, it boomerangs against you because as you pretend to be high and mighty, we remind you of your sordid past.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Hey, let's get it now.
He was in, and now he is out. Big news this week. The governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, considered by some to even be a favorite in this nomination fight, he suspended his campaign this week. Roll it, Chris.
Today, I believe that I'm being called to lead by helping to clear the field in this race so that a positive conservative message can rise to the top of the field. With this in mind, I will suspend my campaign immediately. I encourage other Republican presidential candidates to consider doing the same so that the voters can focus on a limited number of candidates who can offer a positive, conservative alternative to the current frontrunner. This is fundamentally important to the future of the party and, more importantly, to the future of our country.
Well, you heard it here. I've been saying for months and months and months that Scott Walker really needed to improve his performance, that his answers on national questions, on foreign policy questions were extremely weak, and that he risked being another one of those governors that was successful at home but just couldn't rise to the national challenge. Like Governor Rick Perry, like Governor Sarah Palin. We've seen it now a couple of times in recent memory. And he had so much potential and a great track record, executive experience, having stood up to the unions. Was he going to be able to take it to the next level and be a national candidate? He just wasn't able to do it. And his campaign started to bleed in terms of money. They weren't able to get enough money. Eventually, that was the tipping point. He simply didn't have enough cash to continue. And therefore, he did the right thing, suspended the campaign. And if you remember, I had said that following his debate performance, he was pretty much done. And shortly thereafter, he suspended his campaign. Essentially, if he couldn't show at that second debate why he was still a relevant figure, there really was no path forward for him. So he has to pack it in. Okay, that's fine. He tried. He didn't succeed. Big deal. I would have still continued to think really well of him. And yet, I'm annoyed by Governor Scott Walker. How dare he suspend his own campaign and then put forward a preposterous argument that this is a form of leadership, that he is now leading by clearing the field so that a positive message can rise in the GOP field, so that we can basically give our support to one candidate who presents a positive message. It's very obvious what he was saying. He wants to clear the field so that there can be one candidate that can knock down Donald Trump. That is a deplorable exit speech. That is just lacking in grace, lacking in elegance, and also it's full of lies. There's no element of leadership here at stake. when your campaign no longer has any more money to go forward, your campaign has failed, it is over, and there's no more leadership for you. And when you exit, it is preposterous to say that you are leading by leaving. That's ridiculous. You're not leading by leaving. You are just leaving. And most people have the grace to thank their supporters, to talk about the issues that they held dear, and to hope that other candidates pick up those issues. That's what Scott Walker should have done. He should have exited gracefully instead of left the race really like a petulant child. And now what's really at stake is let's rally the field so we can knock out Donald Trump. I thought it was an absolutely deplorable exit statement. And turning finally to culture. This week there was an awesome moment in our pop culture. As you know, I cover pop culture extensively. We do many pop culture stories on this show. And Viola Davis, she is the first black woman to ever win an Emmy in a drama for her role in the television series called How to Get Away with Murder. Congratulations to Viola Davis. And I'm especially thrilled because this is an Emmy that is really well-deserved. I'm a huge fan of the show. I was hooked from the moment I started to watch it. And her performance is mesmerizing. She plays a brilliant, tough lawyer and involved in a crime situation. And she plays a really complicated character, a gray character full of so much nuance. And there are moments of brilliant dialogue, brilliant emotional intensity. This woman is an all-star actress, and she really deserves that Emmy, and she really deserves to be the one who broke that barrier as the first black woman to win an Emmy in a drama. This is one of those cases where my heart beams with joy and pride for this country, because that's not an affirmative action victory, and that's not a victory based on playing a role in some kind of contrived drama about racial relations. In fact, race is never mentioned in How to Get Away with Murder. She has at one point a black lover. Who cares that he's black? She's married to a white guy. It's not really that relevant in How to Get Away with Murder. What's really relevant is her character, her personality, and her talents shine forward. She deserves that Emmy, whether she was black, white, purple, or pink. She deserved it, period. She's an outstanding actress. And I think when we see moments like this in our society, when we are giving an award and an accolade to someone who truly deserves it, and a racial barrier is broken at the same time, that is truly a cause for celebration. And that is the opposite of what we often see when an award is given to somebody of, either a gay or a lesbian or an African-American person, and that award is given because that person is breaking some kind of social barrier in the character that they have played or in these contrived dramas, or we feel that it's an affirmative action victory. It only goes contrary to that mission of trying to advance people regardless of their race and regardless of any other characteristic that they may or may not have. In this case, you have a woman that is playing a complex character. And in that complex character, all kinds of themes surface about human nature, about good and evil. And what we're seeing here is an actress of extraordinary versatility, extraordinary guts, extraordinary courage. And shortly after she won that Emmy, there were statements made by other celebrities. And Kerry Washington, the lead of the popular Scandal series, said that she was delighted that it happened because when something like this happens and that first barrier is broken, then we no longer have to talk about identity politics, but we can just talk about the great artistry that we're saying. And that is 100% right. Congratulations, Viola Davis. Congratulations to the Emmys. And congratulations, America. This is the vision that Martin Luther King had when he said, we want a colorblind society. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that will never die.
With the stars and stripes and the eagle fly. It's a big old land with countless dreams, and happiness ain't out of reach. Hard work pays off the way it should.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.